right now. So Adam, take it away, sir.
You. Good afternoon, good afternoon. Come on everybody inside the convention area. Come on and trickle down into panel section number 2. And we're going to talk about the best topic inside any convention. It's not the cosplay, it's not the merchants.
Wow, it's not the cosplay, it's what?
It's the gameplay. It's the gamers. So come on down, guys, come on down. We're having our 40 decades of gaming. I'm Mr. LOCG. To my left, we have
Mr. P-Giovanni, aka PG, aka PG-13, aka PG-13, aka your favorite non-bait, aka hidden in plain sight, aka the wolf, aka too many AKAs.
Oh, there we go, PG guys. Alongside
Lord Cyber Fox.
Lord.
And Lady Cyber Fox down there. Cyber Fox Game Studios, Dwight Fox, developing a Bahamian video game and a retro collector.
Hey, all right, beautiful, beautiful. All right, so as we jump right into it, as the title suggests, we're going to be talking about 40 decades of gaming, and we have at least 2 decades here of, well, I think 2, I mean, PJ might be in the same bracket, but definitely we have 2 decades of gaming. We're going to go a little bit about that. We're going to talk and just share our experience and hear some of your experience, like what would have been your first consoles and what's not, and how we got around, introduced to us the game, and where have gaming taken us from there to now. So we're going to start with the oldest chap in the box, and we're going to turn the mic over to Cyber Fox, and tell us a little bit, Cyber Fox, what was your first interaction when it came to gaming? What introduced you? How was that story like for you?
Well, you know, Long Island, so we didn't have no game rooms, we didn't have magazines in the stores or nothing like that. You only saw what you saw on the satellite TV, and most of the time my granddaddy was watching wrestling or America's Most Wanted. So, I guess it started with cartoons. The interest started with cartoons. And then the first gaming experience was my cousin. He had an Atari 2600. That was right next door by my Grammy. So of course, you're nice to sneak over there and play it when he wasn't there. So. Because, you know, when you have I guess you have that everywhere, but when you have a game or something in Long Island, it's so hard to get a new one or replace it. People used to be very stingy with who played their games.
I could imagine. Because you could imagine you got one tape and they messed up one tape up and it's like, well, now we have no game because you got the console, but you got nothing to play it with.
Right.
Now, you mentioned, you know, your first experience as the gamer would have been Atari. Can you tell some people just a little bit about Atari? Because I see we have some people here who probably never even seen an Atari.
Well, Atari came out in 1977, the Atari 2600. They had consoles before that.
Come on, guys, come on, have a seat, indulge.
But you know, the home console thing was just starting out, and Atari 2600 really did it because they had the most games other than the Odyssey in them. And if y'all anywhere past the 90s or whatever born, Atari would look like ancient technology to you. It's one of the hardest controllers in the world. The stick is like, you fight it, and y'all worrying about these new controllers with your elite grips and all this foolishness. That there was the torture machine. And the games wasn't all that, believe me. Most of the time you was fighting the signal on the TV, and the game itself was very basic. And you select the games, you didn't have like a start menu and stuff, you select the games from the buttons on the console. We have an Atari 2600 in the middle there for anyone to check it out. I have plenty of consoles in my collection, but I decided to bring the oldest one in my first experience so y'all can see what you're dealing with.
Alright, and then Giovanni, PG.
Right.
AKA the Wolf, AKA Sight Unseen. Tell us, what was your first experience and introduction to video games?
Okay, so I was born in '89, and my first experience in video gaming was, I can't remember which one was actually first. I think I remember having memories of playing the Super Nintendo Entertainment System first. I have very fond memories of playing that because that was like a year after I was born. But I also do have memories of playing the Nintendo Entertainment System. As you know, that was a cross-generation thing going on right there. So the NES was still going strong when the Super NES came out. But all of my strongest memories was from playing SNES at home because we got one the Christmas after it came out. So I have a lot of memories playing in that. And then all of my cousins had the NES. So we would go back down and we played games like Chip and Dale, DuckTales, all of the good classics on the NES. So that's my first experience. And playing the SNES at home, we had Super Mario World. For some weird reason, I always quote it as my first video game played. But I might be incorrect because I might have played something on the NES first. But yeah, the SNES was my first experience from what I remember. Strong.
And NES was just, I guess, the pinnacle of gaming back then because it was just a plethora of games you can just hop on and play. And it's like, oh my goodness, you don't need a disc, you don't need a tape, you don't need nothing, just boot it up and like scroll down the list and you see everything just there. Like, yeah, that's the one right there.
Since he touched on the NES already, I was born in '82. I got to play Atari at like 10 years old. But everything came late to Long Island. And I actually played Atari, enjoyed it or whatever, but I fell in love with video games with Nintendo. So soon as I played the first track and field running on the pad by my cousin, that was it. That was it.
Oh my goodness. I think for me, when I think Nintendo, I remember my childhood, the Donkey Kong 64, oh my goodness, that 4-player co-op when you're playing with Lanky Kong or Diddy Kong and you're shooting your pineapples or your bananas and your nuts. When I think 64, like I could not stop thinking about Donkey Kong, my experience with that. But for me, for my introduction and welcome into the gaming world, I think it would have been the original Xbox. All of the previous consoles I ended up getting after. But my very first console, I think, was the original Xbox, and I'll never forget it because I think it was a Christmas long ago. I was still a kid, I know that for sure. But Need for Speed was out, as well as Halo. And when we loaded up, I don't know if you guys could remember the Xbox startup tune. Yeah, right. Listen, when that happened, it was like, don't even call me for Christmas dinner. Like, we don't need that food no more. It's all about this. And we sat there and we played that until sunrise. I'll never forget that Christmas. Because then we were so tired the next morning. We were supposed to go out as a family and everybody was just in the front room, just knock out cousins, everyone. But so for me, the original Xbox, I think that's when I ended up throwing an Xbox back then.
I have a specific question. How was it going back to the old consoles after you experienced Xbox already?
So for me, it was, I've always been a journey person. So you could tell me about a movie or a series or something like that, and it would not ruin it for me until I go and experience it for myself. So going back to it provided me with that level of understanding and appreciation from where it came from, because I wasn't born in that generation, was not. So to know that this is what they had then, where you have you're just using your paddle to go left and right to hit a paddle ball from one side of the screen to the next, and people played that for hours. I would play that for 5 minutes and be like, I've had enough. But people played that for hours back then, and it was entertainment for them. And to know now, even now, if you jump forward to 2024, where we are now, you look at these graphics now, my goodness, it's like, Jesus, is this real or is this game? Like what, the comparison is becoming so thin now, it's really difficult. So that's when I decided to go back, I enjoyed playing it despite being in the era now.
Since you mentioned Christmas, Xbox, whatever, I would say that when we played the Nintendo by our cousin, we went over by the cousin so much till my auntie basically ran us. And we begged and begged our parents to buy us a Nintendo. And there was one store on Long Island where they got a plane that went to the States every like 3 months or so and get stuff. And we went to the store, Nintendo was there, we begged our mommy and them to buy it. I just want to give my Christmas experience. And this was like, the fishermen go out in September, October, that just be the most expensive part of the year. They get the biggest amount of money and shit. And it was there. and my auntie worked there, and my daddy didn't have the money because he had to go on a trip. So when he came off the trip, we went down there, and it wasn't there. It was like someone shoved a sword straight through me and my brother because we thought we wasn't getting the Nintendo. And then November came, and my mommy always put up Christmas trees the middle of November. And I love Christmas. I ain't gonna tell you, we didn't get much fancy gifts, but I do love Christmas. And lo and behold, underneath the Christmas tree, there was a box the size of the Nintendo box. Now, I will say that was the most joyous moment when we figured out that there might be a Nintendo, but that was also torture waiting till Christmas Day to open up.
What it was? Like, we know it's that size, but we can't be sure.
Believe me, y'all don't know. See, everything these days is like instant gratification. And every time they have a delay on the game, you complain. But it was literally back then in Long Island, if you didn't get the console, you didn't get it sometimes. Like, you literally didn't get it.
So, in your introduction, you mentioned that, you're a game collector right now, and you're a game developer. So, how did that transition came about from playing game, being introduced to it, to say, you know what, I think I want to pursue developing and actually creating my own game? When did that catalyst happen for you?
Well, that happened, I was playing, I was obsessed with Nintendo games. All the Zelda, all the Mario, all the whatever, and this and that. And like I said, cartoons, Batman and them on Saturday morning, X-Men. I think everybody watched them if they was old enough. And because it was so hard to get things, we would end up like repairing consoles and stuff. So we got into like repairing stuff when I was like a teenager. And then automatically that started to transition to having an interest in computers, because they had the computers in the school. And in our school, we had the oldest computers you could ever see from Kingdom Come, them IBM ones. And I didn't really have much interest in making my own game. I was enjoying consuming the games and having all the fun I needed and stuff like that, and fixing the consoles and this and that. But what happened is, one afternoon in high school, it was like grade 11, I was in that staff room, and they had those old computers, and there was a program on there called QBasic. And QBasic, basically, they'll have the code for the game, and then you press play to run it. And there was a guerrilla game on there that the code was there, and then you played it, and that just blew my mind. Just realizing that, because I said, we didn't really have internet and all these books and stuff. The school didn't even have a computer class or anything like that. This was a staff room, old computers. None of my friends had computers. And just seeing the code on the screen and then the game playing and then going messing with that code, that's where my interest to develop games came from. Now, my creative interest, like creating stuff, came from being bored in school, because I couldn't stand half the classes I was in, and I was pretty good in school. It's just I was a little too good at catching on to things, so when they ran on about this and that, trying to explain it to the little dumber students, I had time to sketch in my book, and I used to be sketching cartoons and stuff like that. So I had the creative part there already, and I actually wrote a whole movie that was very similar to the movie where the guy takes that pill and he could do anything, like and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
The computer program movie. Yeah. The three trilogy movie. So PG, now you've mentioned that you were introduced back in the NES. What was now, after the NES, obviously things started to get a little bit more advanced and whatnot. Were you ever an enthusiast of handheld devices? And if so, what was your favorite throughout the handheld devices in the time?
Yeah, the funny thing is, I was more of a home console person. The handhelds, because I guess I wasn't I wouldn't say introduced to handhelds, but because the home consoles was more prevalent, I kind of stayed with the home consoles, but I was introduced to a Game Boy shortly after the SNES. I liked it, but because it wasn't as available as home consoles at the time, because everybody had home consoles more, so people wasn't really into getting the handhelds back in the day. Whoever had one had one. But eventually I became a fan of video game handhelds, and I ended up getting, my first handheld was actually a Game Gear. That's right. The funny thing about that was I wanted a Sega Genesis, and my family was like, the game get cheaper, so we get that. And I was like, I don't want this, right? But I fell in love with it. Although that wasn't my favorite handheld, I fell in love with the Game Gear, and then eventually I got a Game Boy Advance, and the rest. I think my favorite handheld, I would say, would be, I loved my DS Lite. If anybody knows what a DS Lite is. I love my DS Lite because you know the dual functionality and all that stuff too. So that eventually became my favorite handheld, and I think honestly, a close second would have been the Game Gear, because when you look at a Game Gear, if anybody knows what a Game Gear is, when you look at a Game Gear, functionally, a Game Gear is supposed to blow the Game Boy out of the water.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Surely did not.
I think Dwight would attest to that. It's supposed to blow a Game Boy out of the water. It's just that Nintendo had popularity. Yeah, the games. I guess the games too, technically, but yeah. Yeah. So I get Game Gear honorable mention. I'll put that over the DS Lite. So Game Gear, yeah.
I don't know. I think you need to take a page out of my book and go back and try and find some of those handhelds on eBay to play, because I can't tell you the countless hours we playing Pokemon Emerald to Ruby, then to Sapphire. Oh my goodness. And you could not enjoy them better than on a Game Boy Color. And the fact that you've never had the childhood experience of putting double A's in the freezer, putting them over a candle, putting them in the sun, like we need every little piece of juice out of those batteries before we decide, I think I'm gonna just go buy a nice pack. And I'm telling you, you wait until your people go to sleep to go in the room to try and take the batteries out of their remote. Like the struggle, and it was a crisis during Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance. And I think handhelds was so amazing, but it just went downhill. But they're coming back now. I mean, they're the price of a computer now, talking about the Steam Deck and the Asus Rogue. So it's not like you could go and pick up a little handheld no more. So I think handhelds is really good. And he has a good collection of handhelds as well too.
Yeah, I got like 16.
16 too. Pride.
It's a lot of handheld.
Now y'all can hear this a lot, because like I said, Long Island, we was behind on everything. Until y'all play Game Boy underneath a lamplight and street lights inside a car, you ain't know, okay? But I can say this, and it's the same problem with like having the consoles and they break it or whatever. It's the same problem. It's like nobody had a Game Boy. I had one friend come from Nassau who had a Game Boy, and he had the carrying case with everything. And
showing off.
of course, like Giovanni said, we was more into the home console because of the graphics, but it was just, back then it was unheard of for you to carry your game with you. Right. Like, you could carry it, and then, you know, most of us didn't care much about school. So you wanted, and not only that, even if you was a straight A student or whatever, the bus ride to my school was an hour each way. And we had to wait for the other bus to go to Clarence Town and come back. So we was like 2 hours bus in the after school. So carrying a handheld to school was a big deal. I wasn't able to get it because it was expensive and it was hard to get it. But I do have in my collection an original Game Boy that I found in a tamarind tree. It was one of my friends who used to come from NASA or whatever. He left his Game Boy in the tamarind tree. The tamarind tree grew up and it got encased in the actual tree. And I found it, dug it out, fixed it, and I still have that in my collection, and it still works. And like Adam said, the batteries. Another reason nobody was really buying handhelds, batteries is expensive now. They was still expensive back then. And my daddy wasn't into, oh, go buy some more batteries. You know, and when you a gamer like me, back then I was hours. Like, don't sleep in the night if I got a new game from one of my friends. So batteries, so I had to freaking wire a power adapter off of one other thing to plug into the Game Boy. And then a car adapter to keep it on in the car rides. And Long Island long. So the rides is long.
So there are many games that were released over the decades of gaming since its real large inception. What would be that one game that, for you, really you saw the breakthrough in gaming where it's like, wow, this is where it was, This game, Jesus, this is where we're going. Like, what was that one game for you?
All right, that's a really good question because it's a strong debate, I guess, all around the world about where was the actual breakthrough. I honestly think, I would honestly want to say the leap between the SNES and the N64 was it, because that was the 3D revolution and everything. But honestly, in newer rhetoric, there's been a strong argument from that generation of consoles with the N64 and the PlayStation and the Saturn to the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, and the Xbox. And I honestly think that's where it was. And I think a dark horse in that race was the Sega Dreamcast. Yeah, I think the Sega Dreamcast was a dark horse in that race because unfortunately it got considered in 2 generations. Well,
It's a power storm.
right, technically it got considered in the PlayStation 2 era, which killed it. But if it was in the N64 era, then it would have been a very, very strong contender. But I think where it clicked for me, honestly, was in between the N64 PlayStation and the Sega Saturn to the GameCube, the Xbox, and the PlayStation 2, because looking at the stuff on the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube, it was like super mind-blowing. Like everything was bits, right? Like everything between SNES, and I know it's 3D and polygons and all that stuff too. But I guess the bits thing was kind of, you know, it was you kind of used it, your mind was blown, but just seeing how things could look so realistic at the time for the PlayStation 2 and GameCube, yeah, I think that was the leap for me. Even though I still want to say, honestly, between the SNES and the N64.
Clearly, I'm an NES super fan, yeah.
All right, so I gotta answer this a little different because I feel that every generation of console that I experienced, I had a slight leap or a slight moment. Yeah,
These newer generations.
believe me, if you went from Atari to Nintendo,
Yeah.
you felt it. And then all those great games on Nintendo, then you went, well, I went to Sega Genesis before Super Nintendo. You went to Sega Genesis with the blast processing and all the speed of Sonic and Colors. It was like, what? Then I got Super Nintendo with Final Fantasy VI and the Link to the Past. It's like, really, it was a whole other thing again. And then N64, well, technically, actually, I got my Sega Dreamcast after Nintendo again. So we still on track. When N64 came out and I got Ocarina of Time, it was like, again, like, where is it gonna go from here? You know,
What is the next step?
it's just like, seems like every time there was a new generation came out, there was always one game that did it for you. It's like, we lose a lot of that now because there's so much things out there now, and you got so much different art styles. You have so much indies doing those things, and you don't really have that like, this is the best wrestling I've ever seen in my life, and I've never experienced a story like this. And I think another thing that destroys a lot of it is, I get a little off topic with the question you asked, but another thing that destroys a lot is, I was telling somebody else about this, is I kind of like back then, because one example, when we got our Sega Genesis, we got Mortal Kombat with our Sega Genesis, the original Mortal Kombat. Now, we was in Zimbabwe, Long Island. So, we did not know that that game had blood. We played that game for almost 7 months without knowing it had blood and fatalities.
Wow.
My cousin, with his little fidgety behind, couldn't wait for me to come out of the bathroom one thing, and the game was starting up. He was, and then all you heard was the blood code. He put in the blood code by complete accident. Now, y'all wouldn't understand this either. I left that Sega Genesis on for a week. And I asked every single friend I knew from Nassau or thing or whatever what that blood code was. We didn't turn that off until we knew the blood code. So you know, there was a lot of moments in my growing up that I had that thing like where it was the moment. It's like, what the? And Sega Dreamcast, the moment for Sega Dreamcast, it was an awesome console on the whole, we all know that. Well, most of y'all don't. But it was an awesome console. It was basically arcade games at home. And it just fell in the wrong time. It wasn't promoted properly. It was all type of problems with it. But it was my first internet experience. Unreal Tournament on dial-up modem. And dial-up modem connection is like, you know how you load those nice little 4K pictures up on your Facebook profile? Dial-up modem would literally take 10 to 15 minutes just to load that one picture up on your Facebook profile. That's the speed we was dealing with, but that was the best thing ever going into internet gaming. We'll get more into that later, but there was so many moments for me. I can't really pick one, but if I needed to pick one, Ocarina of Time. The graphics was just right, and the game was just amazing.
So, for me, I don't think it was more or less a console that really showed the leap when it came to gaming. But I don't know if you guys remembered when Grand Theft Auto San Andreas came out. It was like next, like everybody was playing it, and everybody knows it. Oh, I'm CJ. Good to be back. Everybody knows that line, and then you find out that you can play co-op with a friend. Oh my God! Even sometimes I actually still have the game downloaded on my console. Sometimes I go back to it because I have such great memories of me and my brother in the afternoons playing San Andreas and just doing stupidness on the game. Like he's on a motorbike, I'm on a bike, and I'm tapping my fingers so fast to see who could win between a bicycle and a motorbike, just knowing I could never beat him, but the memories that made it. And that's gonna segue us into our next question. Like, do you miss gaming back then when you wanted to play with your friends and was not, everybody would come together after and say, okay, we're going to Jerry's house, we're going to Bob's house, and everybody brings their controllers and you plug in and you're playing couch co-op and everybody's laughing and enjoying their time as it is in our times. You know, you hardly ever see your friends from time to time. You just log online, y'all play online, and you forget that, you know, there's a social aspect in life. So do you miss back then, or you feel like now is like, I like just playing away else?
I absolutely miss couch co-op, honestly, because like you said, it's a social interaction experience. You know you're going to see your cousins, your friends, you get to invite people over, and you have your multi-adapter or whatever, and you plug that in, and you all in the room talking trash to each other. You know what I'm saying? You get to get the glory of beating your friends up and, you know, winning and getting that experience, and then they just trying to get to the king of the hill, the top of the hill and everything. I absolutely miss it. I think that there is a place for online gaming. It's very convenient, and I appreciate it. I don't play games online as much as the next guy, but I understand that there is a market for it, and sometimes you just, like, a lot of people have lives and you have a lot of things to do as little children back then. We only had to worry about school and coming home and playing games, but as we grow up now, we have lives and other things to do, so we aren't able to do as much couch co-op as we did back in the days. But yeah, most definitely you miss couch co-op. Get to play as much as possible, going by your cousins literally almost every weekend, hooking up some Mario Party or some Mario Kart or whatever, when you have your GoldenEye 007 and you just go on a tirade and do all of that stuff too. A good thing is some people do keep like couch co-op modes, like 4-player local modes in their games, which is great. I.e. Smash Brothers. I want to play some Smash Brothers. But yeah, I don't think online gaming, in my opinion, would ever top local mode and couch co-op.
Now, I've been through a lot of genres, a lot of generations, a lot of games. I still go to Long Island and play Mario Kart 64 with my friends. So I'm not gonna sit here and say it ain't awesome. Okay, it's still just as awesome as it was back then as it is now. I beat them in the circuit and I threw in their face, "You got bronze, boy? I got gold." And it just felt just as good as when the first time we played Mario Kart. Now, that said, not everybody's like me. I do pretty well around people. Some people don't do too well with social interactions. And I feel that even though I love to sit on the couch with my boys and play games, you still gotta go sit on the couch together. The convenience of the online games and stuff today, and the convenience of having things right at your fingertips, if used in the right way, is awesome. You cannot compare, you know, like I said, the same thing I said, where we didn't have the blood code, we didn't have all them cheats and tricks and whatever, this and that. Now you got the internet. If you're struggling on a game, you don't gotta stop the game completely. I literally had games where I stopped playing because I couldn't figure out one thing. Castlevania Simon's Quest, you could not beat that without a cheat book on Nintendo. And you know how you get the point. That is, when you play in a game and you can't beat it, period.
That's me in any Souls game. Don't feel bad.
The only way we were able to actually beat Castlevania Simon's Quest is my cousin, the same cousin we run on the trackpad, got a VCR tape of this thing that showed how to beat it and stuff. So there are awesome things back then that we had experiences we had, and like playing multiplayer and other things there. You know, the limitations help, but also the new things we have now, like for example, now I don't agree in all this, I could be a millionaire Twitch and this and that, and you would stop your whole life and go be a streamer. I don't believe in all this. Esports could be everything I ever do in life. If I could play one game, I could play all, I could beat everybody. I don't be into all that. Esports and streaming is great. Online game is great, but everything has its pros and its cons and its path. If you get addicted to it and you don't do nothing with your life and you never become famous, it's a problem. It's the same thing back then. If you played all day Mario Kart with your boys and never did your homework and never did anything, then you're getting problems. I feel that a lot has changed, but still a lot has stayed the same, and it's really just the player. It really comes down to what the player prefers. Back then, you had people who only play single-player games. I loved single-player games. I didn't care about playing multiplayer. N64 was the main one that did the multiplayer because of the 4 controllers. And even after that, I didn't care much about online, whatever that I was playing, God of War, Metal Gear Solid, all these single-player Final Fantasies and stuff. And then Call of Duty came out, and everybody killed Call of Duty 4, more and more.
Most definitely.
So yeah, I feel that at least these days, you can have it all. You can literally just sit down and watch someone play a game. You could play games. You could play with somebody, you could play by yourself, you could go to a game, you could do it. I like the fact that it was cool back then that we had more experiences with our friends and stuff and because of the limitations, but it's also cool now that you can have so many different experiences with the new technology.
Yes, most definitely.
And just to piggyback off that, like what Dwight's saying is, yeah, there was a mystique back then, right? Because you either lent out a game or you borrowed a game from a friend or a cousin or whatever, and back then, like, you had to go to their place to play it. You know what I'm trying to say? Nowadays, like he says, you can go and watch everything. Like, I don't even have to play certain games to know everything about it already, and by the time if I go and pick it up, I don't know what's going on. You know what I'm saying? Back then, it was a mystique. I had cousins who said, hey, PG, we beat this Donkey Kong Country game. And I'm like, yeah, you beat it, like, it's my game. And they beat it before me, and then I have to go buy them to go and play it. And then it just bring a camaraderie and bring you together and all that stuff too. So yeah, that's one thing.
Yeah, and that's all another point I was going to make, but I was going to leave it till later. It's a double-edged sword, because as soon as a game is released, there's a million walkthroughs and Twitches that everyone playing it, and some of the secrets are revealed before the game is even in your hands.
Yeah.
So, you know,
there's no more mystery in today's world now. It's just like boom.
It's like we had to going back to Mortal Kombat again. We had to figure out a bunch of the fatalities, like literally figure them out and share them between friends. And even in Nintendo 64, like Ocarina of Time, when you had to find all the Skulltulas or whatever it was to get like the 100% complete on the Skulltulas, it's like you couldn't go and just go on the internet and watch somebody get every single one and figure out what every single. And there was still something. I mean, to these days, there's still things being found in old Nintendo games and tricks and stuff.
A lot of Easter eggs and hidden gems.
But I feel that that's one thing that I will say that I prefer about the old days. Not knowing as much. It's just too much.
Ease of access, more or less.
Even the movies, let's go to the movies, even the trailers. You watch any trailer for any movie these days.
You've watched the movie.
You might not even go to the movie.
You've watched the movie.
Don't go.
Because you only go in there for the conversations at that point. You already seen all the scenes.
So, I'm going to give you another example of that. We had There's a trick that you can do in the original Mario Brothers. We didn't find out about that trick until we was already on Nintendo 64. One of my friends, he was a Nintendo, he used to always play all his old Nintendo games over and over again. He found it, it was so, and we didn't believe it. Oh, I remember what it was. It was the infinite life trick where you jump on the turtles. And a lot of people will say that if you grew up at that time, whatever, it's like you didn't know the infinite life trick with the turtles. Everybody knew that. But we didn't know about it until we got it in 64.
All right, so. Nah, that's an amazing game. I don't know if you guys ever played Jak and Daxter. Oh my goodness. I don't know which was better, Jak and Daxter or Ratchet or Clank. But both of those games were like pinnacle games.
Chef kiss.
Oh my goodness, amazing. There's Carl. There's Carl right there.
Yeah.
You can't talk about PlayStation 2 unless you talk about San Andreas.
Yeah, no.
Oh my goodness. So we're gonna move right along. So I think we're gonna wrap it up with the final question. What was the best game you've ever played, no matter which decade, whether it's one that you went back in time or one that you recently came out? What was the best game you've ever played? And what do you think is the best franchise of game as it relates to games that has series, whether it's God of War with their multiple games, or Assassin's Creed, or the Call of Duty franchise?
Okay, so my best game or favorite game of all time is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Anybody know that game? Yeah, there we go. We got some fans inside of the audience. Most definitely, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and because I
Not Breath of the Wild?
the funny thing is, I ain't complete Breath of the Wild yet, so until I complete it, I can't put that at the top of my list. But yeah, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. It was around the time that I was born, and it was around the time that I got introduced to gaming. I can't remember how I got introduced to the game, but I remember we had a copy at my house and played it for hours on end, hours on end, hours on end. And when I completed it, I just went over and completed it again, and again, and again, and again, and again. And eventually, it made me respect The Legend of Zelda as a whole as the best franchise of all time. To answer your second question.
That's a heavy statement.
Yeah, I think The Legend of Zelda is the best franchise of all time because I remember on Facebook a few years back, I put up a status saying, I love how The Legend of Zelda is becoming a legend itself within the world. Because if you look from the first one to what it is now, there's been minimum misses in the entire franchise. Minimum misses, whether it's handheld or it's system-based. I mean, we all know the honorable mentions and the greatest ones, even over A Link to the Past, is the CDI Philips ones, right? I just play with that. But yeah, best franchise of all times, The Legend of Zelda, in my opinion. And honestly, this might be a hot take, but the second best franchise of all time, in my opinion, would be Super Mario. Super Mario or Smash Brothers. Tie.
Alright, for the person who has like 70 consoles, obviously I can't pick. But I say hands down, my favorite game of all time, one of the best games ever made in the history of gaming, is sitting right on that table, E.T. for the Atari 2600. Just a side note on that, in case y'all don't know, that's the game where they claim destroyed the video game market, crashed it. And it wasn't for Nintendo, we would have been screwed, nobody would have cared about games. Now, the question of best game ever, it's actually the one that's on the list for everybody, Super Mario 3. It like literally won the best game, I think. There's some people who will debate it, who didn't play it back in the day. And that's why I don't say it's the best either. I say it's on the best list. I have a best for every single console. Super Mario 3 for Nintendo, Final Fantasy 6, and Super Metroid Fight for the win on Super Nintendo. And Ocarina of Time. But like I said, if they locked me in a room and they told me you could only play one game for the rest of your life, that would be Super Metroid.
Really? Not the jewel?
Yeah.
Saber Jewel.
No, but the one with the frog.
No, frog.
But that's the good thing about experiencing so much different games over the years in consoles. It's really very, very hard to say which one is the best and thing on. Obviously, like he said, the franchises, Zelda is a big franchise. Mortal Kombat is a big franchise. If you grew up in the 90s, everyone knows Mortal Kombat. That is a very, very difficult question to answer.
For me, personal preference, I think I've enjoyed thoroughly. I could say without a doubt that the Resident Evil franchise was a really, really good franchise.
Top 5.
And
Top 5.
definitely up in the books, if not one of the better franchises. Now, we still got a little bit more time, and I have one interesting question. What are your takes, or what is your best memory, if you have any, of arcades? Now, we've talked about the household game, and we talked about the handhelds. What about those arcades, man?
Alright, well, first time I played in the arcade was 2002.
Which one was that?
As in the mall, Marathon.
Marathon or Town Center Mall?
Yeah, I was in Marathon.
Oh, yeah.
I used to work at Marathon, Cyberjack. So I used to go to my lunch on arcade. We didn't really care or even experience an arcade until then. That's pretty late in my life. But yeah, but that's when Project Rival Schools and Power Stone
Oh, man.
and
So much lunch money on a
Street Fighter, I think it was out. And I will tell you, there was a lot of good games in the arcade, but Project Rival Schools, that was my
Top tier.
That was my And I wish, I do not regret, but I wish we would have grew up somewhere that had an arcade.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, if any of y'all want to experience the real arcade experience, Magasso know what I'm talking about. He's the one who showed me it on his thing because he went, Galloping Ghost in Chicago. If you ever take a trip to Chicago, go to Galloping Ghost. They have like 500 arcade machines.
Yep.
And there's just something really special about some of the arcade machines. It's just like it's just different. Sitting in front of a Mortal Kombat machine and playing it in an arcade it's just different.
What about you, PG? Have you had an experience or memories in the arcades?
Yeah, most definitely. I had early experiences that Dwight experienced at arcades. And although me and my friends and family used to gravitate towards like racing games in arcades because you get to actually sit in the cockpit and all of that stuff too. My favorite arcade experience of all time definitely would be Turtles in Time 4. Turtles in Time arcade. I would waste Turtles in Time and the Simpsons arcade game. I used to literally blow quarters money playing those.
Your stack of 20 rolls.
Listen to me. One time I remember we was at a timeshare away, and they would give us free tokens and stuff just to indulge with the kids while the parents get schemed into buying some more weeks at the timeshare. And dude gave me like $50 worth of tokens.
Oh my goodness.
And I think they had the Simpsons there. And the wrongest thing my family, my cousins did, they left me with the tokens. And I was like, all right, then the Simpsons here.
I got the tokens.
And they came back within like 20 minutes and they was like, come and give us some tokens so we can play games. And I was like,
what
tokens? Tokens. They was like, did you beat the game? Nah, I sucked. I didn't beat the second level or so. But a very close contender to that, honestly, was I wouldn't say it's modern, but I don't know if anybody knows about Sega. They have a game called Afterburner. And if you go into Afterburner cockpit, the thing literally, like the whole cockpit moves with you. And that blew my mind. I never experienced anything. I think there was a attacking game one time where you could actually fight, but still, the Afterburner thing was like one of my top experiences.
Was it the one? I think for when I think of arcades as well too, I don't think I remember that one 2002 in Marathon Mall, but definitely the one in Town Center Mall back in like 07.
Soul Blade.
Oh man, this is a joyous place ever. Like you mentioned, I think some of the first instances, most boys, or I guess people in general, because usually a lot of boys gravitated more towards the arcade than females. I think that was some of our very first experience, like, sitting behind a car when you're sitting inside cruising around the world and listening to the jams and LL Cool J and all their music, or you sitting on a bike riding a motorcycle. Like, those were like some of the experiences I'd be like, okay, yeah, this is initiations. And then you mentioned like Power Stone and all Marvel vs. Capcom, all of those great arcade games, and then jump from before it closed it there, then went to the mall, and then it went back a little bit, then and eventually closed down. But I think the arcade was a joyous place, and I like the evolution of arcade gaming as well, because back then you only had where you had the joysticks and the buttons. And then you got the Dance Dance Revolution, now you start getting your body involved. And now you have the ones like the gun games that's more interactive with the screens, as well as like the Resident Evil one that you sit inside of the whole boot turns dark and you're in there. There you go. Like, so I also like the integration and the advancement of the arcade games as well over the years. And I think that's an amazing feat for gaming, especially like we said, over the 40 decades of gaming from then to now, to see what it's progressed as and the constant evolution. Now you can just put on a goggles and you're playing game with the VR system. So it's definitely been a big improvement over the 40 years and decades. But
I will say one thing in closing. What I learned after all these years of gaming is I just encourage everybody to appreciate more what you have. Yeah, we got the best graphics, and on some of these games you look at it as crappy graphics. But I could just make this quick. I came from cranking a diesel generator myself and buying diesel fuel for that to play games for 2 hours. I came from no internet at all to dial up lightning storms, gotta unplug it, and you grab me one, use the phone. I've been through the trenches, okay? So please, don't go and say every time you see a game with bad graphics, or you think it's bad graphics or whatever, say, oh, that's a shitty game, bad graphics. When BPL cut off, don't gouge your mind. Appreciate what you have, because we literally had it rough, okay? Game came and it didn't work. You didn't go back to the store and return it. No, you had to wait until you get another copy from one of your friends, or you fix that.
Or you try to fix it.
Okay? Because my Nintendo did break, and it took so long for me to fix it. It took so long to get a replacement until I was already, took the whole thing apart, took every part out, put it back together, and fix it before I got the replacement. So appreciate what you got. And don't just down everything because, oh, that's the new trend. Let's down everything, let's be negative about everything. You can appreciate old games, you can appreciate new games. You could be without electricity for 5 minutes or 2 hours. You ain't gonna die. And if your friend likes a particular game or a particular franchise and you don't like it, we had a whole console war back in the day. 90s was Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo. We would tear people's heads off if they were Sega and Super Nintendo. And, that's good. You can have a little bit of competitive spirit and stuff. Nothing wrong with that. You don't have to get all touchy and attack people, but appreciate what we have. There's great things back then. There was limitations back then. There's awesome things now. There's still limitations. Just appreciate, enjoy it. It's all about enjoying.
And final remarks, like Dwight mentioned, with the advancement of gaming, obviously now it's, it became an industry as well. As it relates to esports and the competitive aspect. It's been back then as well, but now it's becoming more lucrative now. And with everything, you have to do it in moderation as well. So you have to understand there's also pros and things that you do, there's always cons you do. You have to find the right balance for you, as well as those who may have kids in the crowd as well, because a lot of people still try to stigmatize gaming as a negative aspect or what's not, when in fact it isn't, and it provides a lot of health benefits as well as therapy. But we're not gonna go down that road. I say that to say, in everything we have to give balance and understand sometimes what the pros are and what the cons are, and we navigate through life through that.
Before you all leave, you can take a look at the Atari 2600 if you haven't looked at it already. And we have some sheets there with different consoles over the years that you can read, take them, whatever.
Make sure you touch it too, because a lot of people have never even touched an Atari before. So
yes.
so just touch it and be like, oh, this is what it is.
Feel the stick. The stick, and you could see the stick is very.
So once again, guys, we want to thank you so much for coming to the 40 Decades of Gaming. I remember to keep on gaming, all right? The cosplay tournament starts in 7 p.m. over in panel room 1, so make sure you guys go and check out and support as well. And then we're going to come back here for our closing ceremony at 8 p.m. and performance from Jason Page.
We got a question.
You can have a question, sure.
What are your thoughts on the current debate that goes on with on the topic of emulation? Because I see emulation as a way to save over video games. Because a lot of the games that we play, like all of the old games that us as collectors play, we have to emulate them because some of them like they don't work or whatever. And then you have companies, big companies like Nintendo, like suing you outright or like causing you like I don't even stream Nintendo games anymore. I don't stream Nintendo games anymore. What's your thoughts on emulation? What do y'all go deal? I kind of know Dwight Fox.
Well, you know, I've been a pirate from a long time. So, and if you don't want to talk about the pirate, you want to. I'm a game developer, so it's kind of shitty that I pirate games and I'm actually going to sell games. But the reality of it is, everything on time becomes more rare and gets destroyed. And I feel that the original thing for emulation is to keep the things available for new generations to enjoy it. The museums have all these artifacts from back in the day or whatever. I feel that Nintendo is being a little ridiculous with their copyright this and copyright that and this and that, when majority of people who's interested in Nintendo grew up on the older games. And they got their original interest on the older games. And they want to play their older games. And if you're going to tell people they can't do this and no emulation of that, then you need to bring out a proper console.
I agree.
You have to bring out a proper console that plays all the old games and stop crying. So I support emulation. I don't support getting the ROMs and reselling them to people. I don't pirate games to resell them either. I pirate games to play them, and sometimes if I really like it, I will actually buy it. So I have like 300 games on my PlayStation 3, and I pirated every one of them before I played them, before I bought them.
Yeah, I also echo his sentiments on it. Like, we wouldn't have to emulate so much if these companies honestly cared about preservation. The companies really, they make it difficult. I would go against you, and Nintendo gives a little bit more lenience when they preserve and they like re-release games, as opposed to Sony. Because Sony, a lot of companies are terrible with it. Xbox doing a really good job with the backwards compatibility of what they're doing right now, but I think everybody needs to get on stream to make everything as fully backwards compatible as possible. Because it ain't even like we necessarily want the originals. It's just that we want to be able to preserve and replay these things. I mean, some people collect and they care about actually preserving all that stuff, which is cool. But at the same time, some people just honestly just want to replay and relive the experiences that they had back then. And with the companies not caring about preservation in terms of just gameplay, they need to do better, which is why we end up pirating and emulating.
Amen.
And then emulation brought out a lot of mods and stuff to like make the consoles last longer and stuff. My Dreamcast, I have two Dreamcasts. It's the original CD one, and then the next one has a memory card in it. And see, I feel that obviously companies lose money from pirating. Obviously emulation has its pros and cons. Everything has its pros and cons. But I feel that it wasn't for emulation community and modern communities and people trying to preserve it different than the companies who made the stuff, it would be a sad.
I definitely agree. I think emulation is really good, especially like you say, the preservation of the game and to know the fact that the game is still have life and you could be like, well, hey, grandkid, this is what I grew up on. Try it out. And then it also benefits the, I guess the company, I can understand that, but it also benefits the gamers in a whole as well, because once these consoles are going off commission, they're not making these anymore, producing them. So you can't be like, oh, I'll go back and play GoldenEye. Where in the world do you want me to find a GoldenEye tape? Nowhere, and our collectors and selling their GoldenEye tape, that's there when they're keeping that, right? So I definitely support emulation, but like you said, it just simply has to be, some regulations to say, okay, yes, you can download it, and that was not like provided for some small stipend or something like that.
And one thing I wanted to say too was it sucks that we live in a capitalist society, it's what we're used to, but it sucks because everybody trying to profit, right? The thing is we don't even own our games no more right now. And that's one thing that bugging me a whole lot right now. Like I have an Xbox 360, Red Ring of Death, and I have like gems on it that aren't re-released, and I'm stuck on that until I get that fixed. I don't even own my games because I can't fix my Xbox right now. You know what I'm trying to say? If your system goes bad, you don't own your games no more. You know what I'm saying? Even with some physical releases, they have like walls behind it where it's like you need to activate, like if the system down or whatever, you can't really activate it. No, that's stupid. You don't own nothing no more. And I think they need to get this capitalist mentality out of their mind. I understand big money, of course. But still, yeah, it's a lie. It's a lie. But yeah, we need to do more. We need to do this.
Thank you so much, guys, for coming out.
And anyone can hit me up, Alan Dance on TikTok or Cyber Fox Game Studios if you want any more information on different consoles.
Plug in, baby, plug in.
Yeah, Cyber Fox Game Studios, retro-inspired video games coming out next year.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for now. It is now 6 p.m.